Good afternoon, everybody. Today I shall be talking on the structure of the birthday party. Harold Pinter's birthday party. Well, what do we mean by structure? Well, we have to begin from there. What is Aristotle's definition of structure? Or does Aristotle mean the plot when he actually refers to the structure of the plays? The beginning, the middle, and the end that a literary work must have. Well, for Aristotle, definitely he was meaning a tragedy or a comedy or even an epic. Well, he suggested that a literary work must have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that there should be a central course of action. There may be subsidiary plots or subplots, but finally all these episodes and incidents must merge with the central episode. And the middle must necessarily follow from the beginning, and the conclusion or the end should logically emerge from the middle. So that was what Aristotle meant by his concept of tragedy. Now, well, Aristotelian concept cannot be we all know that it cannot be applied to a modern text, especially a text by a man like Harold Pinter. Now, well, what is a structuralist analysis of a text or a play? Well, if we talk of the mimetic criticism, what do you mean by the mimetic criticism? Well, there, literature primarily is an imitation of the reality. The literature is an imitation of the reality. That is the mimetic criticism. And what do we mean by the expressive criticism? Expressive criticism means the creative imagination of the author. Well, the author's feelings, the author's temperament, and the author's imagination, all these are expressed in the text. But there are other points, and there are other views, and the critics will say that what is a literary text? Is it a communication between the author and the reader? But, well, all these are challenged. All the inherited ways of thinking are challenged and destabilized by the modernist and the postmodernist thinkers. So it is, in fact, a destabilization of the foundational assumptions and concepts. The foundational assumption that there must be beginning, middle, and an end, and it should center around an episode, a story concerning a protagonist. So all these concepts are challenged. And in the birthday party, well, Harold Pinter very naturally challenges this concept. He challenges the concept that the plot is structured action. In fact, we have to look at the birthday party or the structure of the birthday party from different angles. Because, well, when we read the birthday party or when we see the play being enacted on the stage, we are reminded of many things. And, well, we can try to connect the present play with those things that come into our mind. And we shall see the dissimilarity. We shall see how Pinter deviates from the earlier concepts. For example, some critics have referred to Marlowe's Dr. Faustus. Well, the last scene of Dr. Faustus and the last episode of the birthday party. Now, what happens in the last scene of Dr. Faustus? Well, Faustus is waiting for the agents of the devil to come and drag him to the devil. Faustus is panicked. Faustus suffers. But Faustus knows and understands that he himself is responsible for the plight that he is going to face. And there are a few scholars who are standing beside Dr. Faustus, keeping him company, advising him to remember God, etc. What happens in the birthday party? Stanley is being dragged. To whom? To Monty. Who is that Monty? We do not know. Is Monty the devil? We do not know. And McCann and Goldberg, are they the agents of the modern devil? We do not know, but we can try to guess. Well, does Monty mean the establishment? Should we try to think that Stanley stood against establishment, challenged the authority of the establishment, as Faustus challenged the authority of God and made a pact with Satan? So, well, finally, Stanley is being dragged. But, well, if we think deeply, we can understand that the similarity is only incidental, because Stanley has already been drained of his power of thinking. Till the end, Faustus can think. But Stanley has been reduced to a vegetable, and he is being dragged. Now, in Dr. Faustus, the scholars were there beside Faustus. And here, in the birthday party, there is no scholar, but only the feeble old man, Pete. The scholars were giving advice to Stanley. And the scholars were giving advice to Faustus. And Faustus knew that there's no point in listening to them, because, what he had done perhaps could not be forgiven. And he had sinned so much that he could not ask for the forgiveness of God. So Faustus was in full power of thinking, which does not happen in the case of Stanley. And Pete feebly says, Stan, do not let them dictate you, something like that. So he would be dictated. Pete could understand. The Pete was warning Stanley to retain his individuality, his identity. Perhaps Pete too knew that identity perhaps is a misnomer. So, although the critique I just referred to try to connect the birthday party with Dr. Faustus, but the similarity, as I've just mentioned, is only incidental. Now, what is the birthday party? The birthday party is an indictment against the establishment of and society. What is this society? What is the establishment? The power that operates, and the society that is run by the power. Can anybody go against that? If you try to go against that, what will be your predicament? Stanley perhaps wanted to go against it. He was no more willing to work for the establishment, and he fled. That was a kind of a passive protest. But Stanley could not save himself. And the establishment is flawed and hypocritical. But the establishment is run by power, and therefore the power will always have its last say. Restraint is futile because the individual finally is crushed by power. The protagonist, if we accept that Stanley is the protagonist, we do not know, of course, whether we can call Stanley the protagonist. But if Stanley is the protagonist, we have to say that the protagonist is reduced to nothingness. And finally, he's being dragged to be enslaved by authority, and he'll be rendered voiceless. He wanted to raise his voice, maybe passively, but he will be rendered voiceless finally. And I mentioned this right now, that Pété's feeble voice of protest at the end, stand, don't let them tell you what to do. Stand, don't let them tell what to do. Well, that also sounds futile, because Stanley himself is not in a position to hear. Well, his thinking power has been drained out of him, as I said. And the feeble warning of Pété and the condition of Stanley, they only underline the helplessness of human predicament. So, we must not think of the birthday party in terms of a conventional structure, because the birthday party is a play which has a message, which has a particular issue to convey. It is a message against the ruthlessness of establishment and the helplessness of the individual man. Now, well, if we try to think of the structure of the birthday party in terms of a conventional structure, we have to first point out that the birthday party has a cyclical structure, because let us look at the ending of Act 3. So, Act 3, what happens at the end of Act 3? Now, Meg has returned from her shopping, and Meg and Pété, they start conversing once again. Once again, the same questions and the same answers. So we can say that the ending of the third act mirrors the beginning of the first act. Therefore, well, the birthday party has, in a way, a cyclical structure. Establishment. What is establishment? Establishment is a rigid pattern, but it is empty and it is void of life. Even the agents of the establishment, Goldberg and McCann, well, we have to think about them. Goldberg and McCann, they are also devoid of any human vitality. But Goldberg thinks of the past, remembers his past. He tries to remember what he was at one point of time and what he is now. So perhaps, well, we do not know. Does he try to get out of this vortex? Maybe he too tries, he too thinks, but he knows that it's not possible, because, as I said, establishment is a rigid pattern. although it is empty, because we do not know what Monty is, what Monty does, what the purpose of Monty finally will be. We never know. But it is ruthless and it is devoid of life. Because what is life? Life means growth. Life means hope. And ruthless authority cannot speak of any hope. And therefore, it cannot speak of any growth. And as I said, as one critic has said very interestingly, that, before the arrival of Stanley, what was there in the house of Meg and Pete? Well, a simple, placid, and lifeless existence they had. They had nothing. They are a childless couple. They have no hope. They have no future. Only monotony. The day-to-day existence was a monotony for them. And then came Stanley. Stanley was as if a child to them that perhaps they longed for a long time they longed for. But in a way, Stanley disrupted their life. Their life was disrupted. Stanley's activities, Stanley's nagging demands, and the restlessness of Meg, who always thought that she must keep Stanley in the house with her. When Stanley says that he'll go away and perform in a new city, when he says that he was a great performer, he had his concert and he has been invited to perform in different places. Meg is almost out of breath. Meg is panicked. What she will do if Stanley goes away? So, in a rather placid and movementless life of Meg and Pete, Stanley in a way brought some kind of movement, and may we be allowed to say that some kind of disruption. And Goldberg and McCann, by taking away Stanley from them, return to Meg and Pete the life they were used to. As I just now said, at the beginning of the play, simple and foolish questions and simple and monotonous answers. That was how the play began. And Meg finally returns from his shopping. Meg doesn't know that Stanley has been taken away. But the play ends with the same pattern. Meg questioning to her husband and Pete trying to answer. So the beginning was a conversation between the husband and the wife, Meg and Pete. The end was the same kind of conversation between Meg and Pete. And life will go on its own monotonous pattern. So, What will Meg and Pate do now? Well, Stanley, although a passive man, perhaps tried to put some vitality in the life of Meg and maybe also in the life of Pate, because after all he was present over there. But life will always be deprived of vitality, and therefore Stanley must be taken away from the family of Meg and Pate. The individual, that is Stanley, the individual is carried away. And now, what remains for Meg and Pate? Waiting, endless waiting. And we are reminded of Beckett's play, Waiting for Godot. So endless waiting, endless waiting. Now, well, can we call this play an existential play? Well, we cannot. Perhaps we cannot. Because here, in this postmodern text, we find a lack of self-perception in every character. The lack of self-perception is there in Meg. Meg doesn't know what she wants. Pate is almost voiceless. Lulu, well, she doesn't know what she desires. And only Stanley perhaps has some kind of plan or dream. Maybe the most of his plans and dreams are imaginary, but still then he has his plans. Participating in a concert like that. So the individuality, that is Stanley. Well, if we say that Stanley symbolizes individuality, Stanley is taken away. So individuality is taken away, and the characters are left with nothing but eternal waiting. Well, that is the structure of the birthday party. Thank you very much.